I will say that the next individual I'm about to bring up here, the 4.5 pages of the introduction I actually left at the table, but I can knock it down to a simple 5-word introduction. Thomas Sweeney, or he told me, when he hears Thomas Sweeney, he thinks he's being punished or he's in trouble. It's his full name. Tom Sweeney's about to come up here and share with us, but all I really need to do is say, Sween, the news machine. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Sweeney.
Actually, what I said was, when I read the program tonight, it had Thomas Sweeney. And I said, my God, I feel like I'm being chastised by the nuns. I am the president of something called the Greater Cleveland Fisher House. I'm a volunteer. So at this moment, I'm doing the best non-paying job I ever had. I'm also an Army combat vet from Vietnam and a strong believer that one generation shall never again turn its back on the next. A Fisher House is the veteran's equivalent of a Ronald McDonald House. Go ahead. A Fisher House is the equivalent of a Ronald McDonald House. It's just that simple. It'll allow families, moms, dads, wives, husbands, and children of wounded, ailing vets undergoing surgery, treatment, and rehabilitation at the Cleveland VA, the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Metro, and any other regional hospital to be together during that time. No cost to the family. Family is comfort. Holding someone, holding a hand is good medicine and a huge part of the healing process. NEOPAT has raised money for this project, and our thanks for that is deep. I merely want you to be aware of the Greater Cleveland Fisher House and ask that you mention our effort to others. It would be a tremendous help. We will wait for them and pray for them till they all come home. That was in print and even in song during World War II. And at 67 years old, I will tell you that I have the temerity to amend it. We will wait for them and pray for them until they all come home. But if they are broken, we will fix them as best we can. And we will do it with the help of their families. That may be the closest thing to a commercial message that you've heard all night tonight. As I thought about tonight, what crossed my mind was a moment many, many years ago. I was living in New York City, where I grew up, the People's Republic of Queens. Vietnam and the Army were behind me, sort of. I was back in school and I was riding a subway to class. In New York City, you don't make eye contact with other passengers on public transportation. It's just not done. So I was gazing at the bus cards, you know, the advertising above the windows and above the passengers across from me, and what caught my eye and my imagination was a wonderfully terse, almost startling advertisement for the United Way of New York. It was bold white letters on pitch black cardboard, and it simply said, "Give a damn." Huh. I remember smiling and thinking to myself, now that is the simplest, strongest, most concise, most effective call to action I'd ever come across. It was minimalist and all-inclusive at the same time. No need for more words. The people who read it, like me, supplied their own words, images, faces, issues, situations, priorities, and even emotions. It was a brilliant call to care about someone, something. You decide who and what is important and why, and then do something. I thank you, each and all of you, for giving a damn, and I'm proud to to be in your company. Again, I wrestled with what I could say tonight succinctly about this event, our vets, Greater Cleveland, and each of you, but that was decided a long time ago before NEOPAT asked me to speak. It was decided 48 years ago in a place called Bang San, Vietnam, when Lieutenant Charles Wilcox was killed in action. Linda, I never knew your husband. I wish I had. Kurt, I never met your father. But one thing is certain, I'd have called him sir. The lieutenant would have easily traded that for Dad. To Mr. Lindsay, I say to you, you have my admiration. Linda and Kurt have had your love all these years. Tonight was also decided more recently in 2011 when Sergeant Dan Patron was killed in action in Sangin, Afghanistan. That was after 2 tours in Iraq. Frank, Kathleen, I wish I knew Dan because as an old reporter, although Kathleen, you did answer my question, I would quickly find out what instrument he played before he took combat training and then watch as his eyes dance and that famous smile played on his face as he told that story and many, many more. Wife Cody, brother Matt, Megan, Mia, Dan's own namesake, you each play to that unbridled joy of Dan's. Smiles are his legacy. I got to be honest with you, I am not a professional veteran. I don't have a set of starch fatigues hanging in a closet ready for the next parade, but Charles, Dan, and I shared something. Charles wore a bar on his shoulder. Dan and I each wore 3 stripes. But all 3 of us were grunts, infantry riflemen. There's no glamour in it, but I will tell you that there's an indefinable bond, actually an exclusive fraternity, that sometimes is loud, but mostly silent. There's a fierce pride in that fraternity, and sometimes an equally fierce and piercing heartbreak. Tonight was one of those times. It is good to be with you. Some of you are veterans. All of you are friends of veterans. You are all patriots. We do have a luxury when it comes to veterans and issues of patriotism. There is no opposition. There is no political, economic, community, or personal agenda that opposes us. Our only enemies are apathy, ignorance, and ingratitude. Clearly, we believe that it's our duty to thank and honor the veterans of the Afghanistan war being fought today, but also those dwindling few who served in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq recently, and other U.S. conflicts around the world. But I suggest to you tonight that that is not enough. We have an obligation to act and to help. Let's talk about why. A true story floated into my mind, and it may relate to it. You may relate to it because it has to do with change and how and why change happens. The story is based on a question, and you may have heard it. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? Silly, but interesting. Is what crossed my own mind when I heard it many years ago, and I knew immediately, as you probably do right now, that the intent of the question is to lead us to the conclusion that even the slightest stir or change in our physical world has an effect, a measurable result. Very clever, I thought, very subtle, very zen, very metaphysical. So this Irish Catholic fellow, me, put it aside for all practical reasons, and I breezed along living life. But apparently it stuck in some recess of my not too overly exercised mind. Then 2 years ago, I read an obituary. An 81-year-old PhD in meteorology at MIT named Edward Lorenz passed away. He'd led a quiet, full, satisfying life, nothing remarkable, until you get to the fact that it was Dr. Edward Lorenz who wrote the question. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? So it was not a philosopher, wasn't a priest, not a dreamer, or some robed guru. It was written by a scientist. And here's the part I love best. It was the title of a scientific paper based on weather models his very large, very primitive computer slowly spit out in 1961, 52 years ago. He fed it temperature, air pressure, humidity, wind, and other data. The numbers and models his computer calculated and printed were no surprise. However, a scientist double checks. So he ran the equations again using a very, very minor shortcut, just to save time. He rounded them off infinitesimally. What he got back staggered him. The models, the results were astonishingly, hugely different. And the implications changed science forever. It meant that a weather pattern predicted to cause rain in Las Vegas could instead materialize as a blizzard in Beijing a week later because minute and seemingly insignificant changes happened to the equation. Here it is again. Predictability. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? Lorenz won a Nobel Prize and many more awards and accolades. The paper is now one of the most scientific studies that's most referenced in modern history. His discovery is ranked along with the theory of relativity, quantum physics, and the international scientific community unanimously agrees that quiet, unassuming Edward Lorenz brought about, and this is the quote, the most dramatic change in mankind's view of nature since Sir Isaac Newton. That's an absolutely true story, which at least to me says that even a whisper of a cause can and does have a profound effect. Why? Because the equation, that series of factors, each progressively influencing the next, is forever changed. And because the equation is changed, the result is inevitably changed, greatly changed. That's my story. I tell it because of the equation that's sitting in this room tonight. It's you. Each of you who choose to give a damn. Each of you are the elements, the factors in this ever-evolving equation called America. It's a prayer. This America is a prayer. It's said softly, but it's acted upon by you with loyalty, determination, and intent. You are needed today as in no other time, because our enemy is the enemy of the modern world, the enemy of any evolved thinking, compassion, empathy. He does not sip the milk of human kindness. He has perverted the message of his own God, respects no flag, no country, no life, no freedom, or individual thought. There is no consideration given to human life, love, or anything close to happiness. There are not overwhelming numbers of them, but they do recruit well anywhere they can to increase their ranks because they market hate of the Western world and the United States. I know you're acutely aware that our enemy's strategy employs terror in the modern world, even against its own people. Terror to spark horror for the sake of power and control, but you know that. Today we, the U.S. military and the rest of the civilized world, are fighting the illogic, zealotry, bigotry, and suicidal fervor of something you cannot see because it, too, started out as a prayer. That prayer, that ideal, became twisted by paranoia, resentment, and a hate born in a closed, xenophobic, rewritten version of history. But you know that too. As for us here today, we share an unshakable belief that no matter if or how you worship or believe, that we were created to be free, to live in history and create a sane, rational history in this hazardous, magnificent adventure of living and seeking to make human life just a little more human. Let me tell you why I'm absolutely sure of that. Talk to any man or woman in America's military, military. Talk to the graduates of the military academies. Talk to any veteran who has ever carried a rifle, flown a plane, or sailed. And they will tell you that in this country, we train to do that which we pray. We are never called on to do, but if the call comes, we do it with regret, because it means that all else has failed and lives will be lost. And we value life. Those are our values. That's the worth we ascribe to life and the way it's lived. It's our way. We call it the American way. We have men and women in service today because they answered a call to duty. They volunteered. Charles Wilcox did. So did Dan Patron. So did my father. So did my brother. So with two of my table mates tonight. They answered their call based on their own reasons, or maybe reasons shared with them from someone they knew or trusted or loved. We've had a volunteer military since the 1970s. No one has to serve. Most, maybe understandably, decline. War is, after all, dangerous. And I'll add this one. No one asked the American people to pay for Iraq and Afghanistan. We put them on a credit card. And here's a startling quote from a U.S. Marine. We're at war, and America is at the mall. You are being asked to volunteer to serve and help those who volunteered to serve us. Some lost their lives, but many were seriously injured or wounded, physically or psychologically, or very likely both. Do you know what they want? Do you know what they need? To be included again in civilian life. Hooah! You've heard that shouted in a military context, maybe a war movie. Hooah! In fact, it's communication. H-U-A. Heard, understood, acknowledged. What do you want them to hear, understand, and acknowledge? They need to hear, we've got your back now, soldier. We understand your care and the care you have for your family. And yes, we firmly acknowledge your service. The call to action today, ladies and gentlemen, is as simple as it is powerful. Talk. Tell your story. Say what you believe, and most importantly, why. As a sensible patriot, maybe a veteran, maybe a supporter of veterans, but as a thinking American, pass along, share the ideal, the reason for this prayer we call America with yet another generation. They live next door. They're your friends, your relatives, your acquaintances, and their children. Remember, this is not a war cry. It's not a war story. It's a prayer of understanding. The reason that America was born, the reason that it exists today. Tell that story. Tell it with its meaning, the why, and then act. Involve yourself and advocate for those who volunteered and their families in education, the job market, medical care and treatment. Make the case for America and her volunteer veterans quietly. Talk. Keeping in mind that in this country, debate is not allowed. It is required. Listen and talk. Tell your own story quietly. People relate to people, not to buildings, not to institutions, certainly not to money. People. People communicate with each other by telling stories to each other. We do it all day. We do it every day. Stories is what we do. I do documentary work and create communication strategies so that something, anything, can be understood. Obviously, I tell stories too. Tell your story, please, so that young boys and girls and young men and women today come to understand that they too are key factors in this great complicated equation, this ever-evolving, always meaningful America. Their participation in the equation will determine the atmosphere, how hard and where the wind will blow. In other words, the forecast for our country and our world. Yours did and does. Your understanding of life's meaning, pass that along too. And so the question hangs. Could the slightest stir in the way we think help reach and teach ourselves, each other, and our young, create the kind of change that impacts and affects national thought, local and regional attitudes towards citizen service, and the direction of a future that we certainly will all share? The answer, my friends, is not blowing in the wind. It's clearly, emphatically yes. You see, we, you and me, we are the butterfly. And the predictability of any outcome is impacted and changed when the butterfly flaps its wings. Ladies and gentlemen, live this life as it unfolds. Feel it. Assign your own meaning to it. But most importantly, love. Love someone, something, deeply, passionately. Talk. Share your story. And please, by all means, lead with your heart. My profound thanks for being here. My very humble thanks for giving a damn and asking me to join you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the NEOPAT board, everyone here tonight, and all patriotic Americans in the greater Cleveland area, I think you would all agree that Tom's efforts at the Fisher House and the efforts of his team are very worthy. And for the people that they help, we want to do all we can. So on behalf of everyone here, I would like to present Tom and his team with a check for their efforts for $5,000 as well to the Greater Cleveland Fisher House. Thank you. This is the dog. Thank you.
I will take literally 10 seconds and tell you this is a surprise. I even said to Mike Swallow about a week or so ago, I said, do you mind if I take about 30 seconds at the beginning and just mention Fisher House, and then we'll go on with the talk? He said, go ahead, Tom, do it. Fine. And that's why I said something about the commercial. And this is a thank you from me to you. I really appreciate it.